international law and the sources of international law. I repeat, introduction of international law, sources of international law. I will have no others. Right? I'm not going to put anything else in here. It's a 50-minute test. I'm not going to put 15 chapters in this thing. That would be wrong. So, what type of questions will I be asking? Well, I think I've already kind of went over one possibility.
Hypothetically.
But then there are also some others. So, customary international law is a form of international law that is based not on an actual legislative treaty, but based on normalized behavior practiced between parties over a long period of time, to the point that violating it is almost like violating a treaty. You're violating a norm. That's customary international law, as opposed to a legislative treaty. We just covered this, didn't we? Yeah, we've been covering it the entire semester. A legislative treaty is law. It's an actual treaty that parties sign of their own free will based on consent of nation states. They've gone through a negotiation process, they've signed and ratified. That's a treaty. That's a legislative treaty.
So the second, hypothetical question, what is a legislative treaty?
I don't know. Something like that.
Okay.
The next. I can give away everything, right? You guys
I
are
said
set.
hypothetically, Dr. Fry.
That's great. You're really good at this hypothetical stuff. I like it. Excellent job. Keep doing that. Next thing, we talked about resolutions. Resolutions in international law, and in particular, resolutions that are from the UN Security Council. When the UN Security Council passes a resolution, does it become enforceable under international law? We talked about this in class, guys. I swear to you, this is not a trick question. When the UN Security Council passes a resolution, does it become enabling? Does it become enforceable in international law? Yes, it most certainly does. It's the one body on the planet Earth that can do that. That would make a great situational question, by the way. We talked about, in the sources of international law, jus cogens defense. All right, so what the heck does that mean? I don't want to go back to the Romans, okay? I could do that, but I'm not going to do that. So the idea of jus cogens is that a state has a right to exist, a national government has a right to exist, the right to consent, the right to national sovereignty, and if somebody attacks me, I have the right to self-defense. And also, I kind of have to abide by treaties too at the same time when I sign. But that's a defense. That's absolutely defense. So let's say the Canadians attack us tomorrow. They just decide to invade the United States of America. And at that point, we don't have to go to the UN Security Council and ask for an enabling resolution to defend ourselves from the Canadians. We can absolutely just go to war with the Canadians because they have elected to invade and attack us. Right? That's a jus cogens defense. That's an example of one. Next, we went over the types of treaties. Right? This was in the beginning of the semester. I spent some time covering the Greeks because they're always so fun to cover. Much more entertaining than the Hittites. And we spent some time covering these different types of treaties that the Greeks, I can't say they totally invented, but they named, and we still call them this to this day. I know those. I would absolutely know those treaties. I would know what the names of those treaties are and what they mean.
So what are the names and what they are?
Yes, there's several of them.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah,
not
like
all
the
of
Philadelphia
them.
Treaty, Monica Treaty, all those cool treaties we talked about. Know what those are. Because those would make a couple of really awesome short ID questions, hypothetically. Now, we covered the Treaty of Westphalia. And we talked about how the Treaty of Westphalia was so vital because we're still living under the Treaty of Westphalia to this day in international law, which is international law is basically the set of nation states and the concept of national sovereignty. That's the Treaty of Westphalia. The other thing that we talked about was, before the Treaty of Westphalia, you had natural law, which didn't entirely go away, but, certainly when it came to international laws, customary and practice, it did. And it was replaced by the Treaty of Westphalia. You need to know this, guys. Know the Treaty of Westphalia section. I covered it. It's very short, but I spent quite a bit of time in class covering that treaty. Sorry, not yet. You got another 30 seconds.
Take as long as you need, Dr. Fry.
Huh?
I said take as long as you need.
No, I'm not going to take as long as I need. Please stop this. All right. The ancient Hittites. We covered the ancient Hittites. All right. And we covered what the ancient Hittites did, their introduction of Hammurabi's law that had elements of international law to it. We talked about the Greeks and all the cool stuff they would do. And then we also talked about the concept of citizenship under the law, which was the Romans, which is just gentium. No just gentium. This is the concept that Paul himself actually invoked in Scripture, guys, when they were trying to stone him in some of these local towns that didn't like him. Well, he's a Roman citizen. All he had to do was just say, just gentium. Oh, we can't torture and kill him anymore. Darn him. He's a Roman citizen. We were hoping he wasn't. So yeah, this dates back thousands of years. The reason why that's important is because the idea of just gentium basically became the foundation, not just of international law, but for that matter, domestic law and national constitutions later on. The Romans didn't know that yet. They'd surprise themselves. All right. Talked about before basically the post-World War II era, what main issue did most international treaties deal with? The main problem with international treaties. And we talked about this so many times in class, I feel like it's the backdrop of the entire class. That, of course, is enforceability. Know what that enforceability argument is. Why is it such a pain? Essay. This is from the sources of international law. Advisory opinion versus a resolution in international law. We talked specifically about the International Court of Justice and the Rome Court. Take a look at that section and understand what an advisory opinion is versus a resolution in international law. Because I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask you for your interpretation, because it is an essay. So I need to see some retention of your knowledge of what both of those concepts are, and I'm going to ask you for your interpretation in terms of your opinion on the matter. By the way, when I ask you for your opinion on something like this isn't math, guys. There's no, you don't see any sigma signs, you don't see AU equals golden here. It's your interpretation. I'm leaving it to you. I hope you formed an opinion of it at that point. And there's no necessarily wrong opinion unless you have something that factually is just completely incorrect. You can have any interpretation that you want. And for those who haven't taken any class before and wonder, no, I don't grade people based on that, ever. Right? But I do want to know what you think. Interpretation doesn't matter because you have to be able to conduct analysis. All right, we're out of time. Oh my goodness, it's 53 after. My next class is like probably out there mad right now. All right, guys, you're ready. Friday when we get back, we're going to do some